The goddess was crying, the demon king had a calendar, and somehow this was my fault. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start at the part where I died. Not in a dramatic way, no epic sacrifice. I tripped. Everything went white, and suddenly I was standing in a glowing room that looked expensive. That's when I met her, the goddess. She had golden hair, a glowing halo, and the kind of smile that said destiny. She clapped her hands and said, I had been chosen. Apparently, I was summoned to another world to save it. There was a prophecy, a demon king, a great evil, the usual. She looked very proud of herself. I waited for her to finish talking. Then I asked a simple question. What's the pay? She blinked. She said, you will save millions. I said, okay, but is this paid? She laughed at first, then she realized I wasn't joking. She started explaining honor, duty, and fate. So I asked my second question. Do I get weekends? The room went quiet. She stared at me like I just asked why the sky was blue. She said, heroes don't get weekends. I nodded slowly. Cool, then I'm going to say no. That's when things started going wrong. She panicked. She told me the world would end without me. Cities would burn. People would suffer. I asked if there was a training period. She said no. I asked about sick leave. She said heroes push through pain. I asked what happens if I just don't. She stopped smiling. That was my answer. She disappeared for a while after that. I assumed she was recalculating reality or screaming into the void. A few minutes later, she came back. This time, she brought a contract. It was floating, glowing, covered in magical runes. It looked extremely cursed. She said very politely that she was willing to negotiate. I flipped through the contract. Gold, fame, a legendary sword. I asked if the sword came with weekends. She sighed and added a clause. 2 days off per apocalypse. Progress. I asked about sick leave. She hesitated, then wrote emotional damage in the margins. The Demon King was listed under workplace hazards. There was a trial period, 1 dungeon. I reached the end of the contract and found a section labeled termination. I asked, what happens if I quit? She looked me directly in the eyes and said, we all die. I nodded. Okay, I said, but I'm not working overtime. That's how I became a hero, technically. My first day was awkward. I showed up late. The goddess was already stressed. She shoved a map into my hands and told me to defeat the Demon King. I asked where the break room was. She said this was a life or death mission. I asked if that meant no lunch. She ignored me. My first quest was a dungeon. I asked if it was optional. She said the world depended on this. I said I'd circle back. Inside the dungeon, the monsters froze when they saw me. One of them whispered, is he Union? I left without fighting anything. On my way out, a message arrived from the Demon King. It said, please advise on office hours. That should have been my warning. Later that day, the Demon King showed up in person. He was terrifying. Armor polished, sword massive, theme music somehow playing in the background. He raised his weapon and prepared a speech he'd clearly been practicing for centuries. I checked the time. Sorry, I said. You're outside of my office hours. He stopped mid-sentence. He asked very carefully, what are office hours? So I explained. Weekends, public holidays, no fighting after sunset. The Demon King lowered his sword. He said no one had ever told him this before. He asked if battles could be scheduled, preferably Tuesdays. The goddess started hyperventilating behind me. The Demon King pulled out a calendar. It already had reminders. I sighed. This is turning into a meeting. That was the moment I realized something important. The world didn't need a hero. It needed boundaries. And somehow I was the only one setting them. This was a bad idea. It gets worse.